Hi, this is Greg at Track 25. Welcome to our series on pushing the limits of Pro Tools Intro and Live Lite, and particularly showing you how to get 1,000 plus channels from each of these apps. In Part 1, we laid out the goals of the series, particularly the pursuit of 1,000 channels instead of 8. We had a demo running Pro Tools and Live in tandem on the same Mac for added channel count and creative flexibility. We also had a demo using a second Mac running MainStage to help get 16 recording inputs instead of the manufacturer's limit of 4. In Parts 4 and 5, we will reach more than 1,000 channels on both apps, while Parts 2 and 3 focus on what can be achieved using only the built-in features, without any assistance from plugins. Today, in Part 2, we focus on Pro Tools Intro. We will walk through the steps of assembling this session. Notice there are 40 channels of playback on 20 strips instead of the standard 8. As we saw in this chart from Part 1, Pro Tools Intro is limited to 8 audio tracks, 4 aux tracks, 8 instruments tracks, along with 8 MIDI tracks. It's worth pointing out that some tracks and combinations of tracks can easily substitute for other types of tracks when needed. Audio tracks or instrument tracks can serve as aux tracks. MIDI tracks can be combined with either aux tracks or audio tracks to serve as instrument tracks. Unfortunately, it would seem that aux tracks and instrument tracks cannot serve as a substitute when we want more than 8 audio tracks. Let's look at a method of changing that. Let's start with these 8 stereo audio tracks. Pro Tools kindly refuses to create a new audio track for us. Let's make 8 new instrument tracks to go along with these. Then we can route the outputs of each audio track to each instrument track. It would seem that we've wasted 8 instrument tracks just to route 8 tracks through extra faders. But let's see what happens if we freeze those instrument tracks. Interesting. We can now delete the 8 audio tracks and still have the 8 stereo tracks playing. Let's try the same technique for the 4 available aux tracks. We have 4 audio tracks with stereo files, and we'll create 4 aux tracks. Then, once again, route the audio tracks. If we similarly freeze these aux tracks, we have copied the audio playback to the aux tracks and can once again delete our audio tracks. Now we have 12 stereo files playing 24 channels without using any audio tracks. We can create our quota of 8 audio tracks and keep building. So we can now answer the question about using aux and instrument tracks. It seems we do have a way to play back audio from aux and instrument tracks. Back to our demo. To make our test work, we'll start out with a small clip of pink noise and place it on an audio track. We create 40 of these tracks in total with the clip shuffled down the timeline like dominoes. Here's our folder of 40 mono test tracks. After putting these onto audio tracks and bouncing them, we get 20 stereo files that contain pairs of these mono sources. Let's start with 8 audio tracks and 8 instrument tracks, with all 20 of these into our clip bin. We'll number the instrument tracks in pairs from 25 through 40. We place the last clips onto the 8 audio tracks, assign them to the instrument tracks, then, as we did before, we freeze the instrument tracks. We can delete the 8 audio tracks, then create 4 new audio tracks and 4 aux tracks. We place the next 4 clips onto the 4 audio tracks, assign them to the aux tracks, and once again freeze the aux tracks. We can now delete the 4 audio tracks and create 8 fresh ones. Now all we need to do is place the 8 remaining clips into our new 8 audio tracks. We can name our tracks 1 through 40 in pairs, choose narrow playback, and make the tracks the same color, so it's easy to see our domino effect. Now this seems fairly useful for channels that naturally fall into stereo pairs, but when we're working with only 40 tracks, lots of them are going to be mono. For the dual mono signals, this seems challenging. From our stated goals, we need to be able to control and automate the level and pan of each of these, and to insert plugins into the strip. The dual mono strips do have 2 pans, so let's work on a level control. Here's an example stereo fader with 2 unrelated mono signals represented on the left and right sides of the track. Let's look at what happens when we choose Trim from the Multi-Mono selector for plugins. If we unlink these channels, we can option-click on the plugin and see 2 individual trim settings. Each of these can be added to the automation selector and receive their own swim lane. Let's use the multi-mono unlinked version of the channel strip plugin. Now both signals have a complete processing chain independent from the other half. If we want a limiter on the left half of the strip, we can add one multi-mono unlinked and simply bypass the limiter on the right side. We have effectively applied a process to only one side of the stereo strip. That brings us to the end of Part 2. Join us in Part 3 when we put Live Lite through its paces with only built-in features to get beyond 8 or even 40 tracks. This is Greg from Track 25. See you next time.